Hey everyone, welcome to episode 39 of the Hybrid Ministries Tech Forum, where we discuss all matters relating to the challenges and opportunities of streaming worship services and other events for any faith. If you're with us live, your questions and comments help to produce the show and discuss the topics that we discuss and steer the topics that we discuss. If you're with us live on YouTube or social media, get a cell phone or a tablet ready for a QR code that I'll put up in just a moment. It'll be important. There are several ways you can engage with us and with each other during the show. The first is by asking questions. That's in our custom Q&A platform that we call Makana, and I'm going to put a link to Makana in the Zoom chat, and I'm going to give you this QR code that you can scan if you're not on Zoom. You can't see the chat. So this is where you can get to our Makana Q&A platform, and we'll take it from there. And if you're with us live on Zoom, you can stick around after the show ends, and we're going to do a post-show where we can have casual conversation with open microphones. And if you'd like to participate on our panel, maybe you can offer a different perspective and a different experience or information for our viewers. Just get here 30 minutes early before showtime, and we'll check you in. Now, on most Mondays, I co-host an audio conversations meeting where we work on skills for critical listening, sound editing, sound systems, troubleshooting, lots of troubleshooting. And it's a very casual thing, so it's not recorded. And there's no performance pressure, and nothing is going to be recorded for later viewing. The conversation can cover other pressing issues such as cameras, video, networking, etc. So come and join us on Mondays. We're moving to a new time slot on Mondays. We were at 3 o'clock in Eastern Time. Now we're going to 6 o'clock Eastern Time starting this Monday. So you can also look for details in our Discord under Monday Training Class. So log in using the same Zoom ID as for today's show. All righty then. So what was your journey, your church's journey towards live streaming like over these past 3 years? Between all of the differences, between all of the different faiths, denominations, congregations, ministries, worship styles, and even management styles, every house of worship on the planet had to adapt to online worship in order to survive. So the opportunity to hear about the paths that other congregations have taken on their journey towards live streaming can be very informative and comforting and even validating of our own experiences and choices. So today, Michael Kyer and Joe Saline from the Olympia Unitarian Universalist congregation in Washington State are here to join us to tell us about their story. So hello, Michael and
Hello.
Joe. How are you? So tell us a little bit about the church to start off with.
Yeah, let me just start. Is my mute on? Okay, good. Right, my name is Michael Kyer, and I use he, they pronouns. Before we start, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody joining us live today here in the Zoom meeting or watching on YouTube or watching in the future. It's a special day today, and I'd like to take a minute to recognize that today is International Trans Day of Visibility. And I'd like to say very loudly and very proudly that trans and non-binary people always have and always will belong everywhere. I see you, my friends, and I call on everyone to join the fight for full equal rights for trans and non-binary people. Today is a special day. We're celebrating the accomplishments and the victories of trans and non-binary people. And I want to raise to your awareness the work that still needed to be done to save lives of trans and non-binary people. So I just wanted to start off by saying that because today is a very special day. Um, but I introduced myself. My name is Michael Kyer. Again, I use he, they pronouns, and I provide technical services for OUUC and on a volunteer basis. I do this for as a volunteer. And so we started back doing this at the beginning of quarantine. And so we're a little congregation, about 900 members, I believe. Is that right, Joe?
No, smaller. We're about 300
Smaller.
members.
We're at 300 members. Oh, I was thinking the online, the folks on Facebook. So
Oh,
that's what I was thinking about. Joe, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
sure. My name is Jocelyn. I use they, them pronouns, and I am the Olympia Unitarian Universalist Congregation's media specialist. So I do communication and technology support for the congregation.
Okay, so the church itself, let's see, where should we start, Marty? Start with the physical layout of the building? Is that what your question was about?
Yeah, how big is the church? Oops. How big is the church? And hello. How big is the church? How big is the sanctuary? And I know you'll take us through your transformation from beginning to end, but give us a little pretext about your church to begin with.
The sanctuary, I believe our seating is it at 60? I think it's about 60 is what capacity is there.
The capacity is actually about around 150, and yeah,
Wow.
and pre COVID, pre pandemic, they were filling it for two services actually on Sundays, and then I don't know what the square footage of the building is, but they're pretty sizable classrooms as well, and some youth rooms, nursery, that type of stuff, and offices. Yeah.
And so, were you doing any sort of streaming pre-COVID?
Yeah, OUC had been on video for a number of years and had started streaming to YouTube. It was set up to stream to YouTube beforehand. We were streaming with, sorry about that. Okay, there we go. Um, we were streaming with just a single digital camera right to one of those little Mac mini computers right out to YouTube. And so that was a live stream. And then later on in the week, one of our longtime AV volunteers would edit that down to just the sermon and post that to the website. So
When did you start doing that?
I'm not sure when they started doing that. It was a progression. It had been at least, I think, 8 years building up to that point of streaming to YouTube. But I think that they were only actually streaming to YouTube for maybe a couple of years prior to quarantine. So it wasn't terribly long,
If that,
if
I
that.
think it was, yeah, the actual live stream. I want to say it was only a couple months.
It was only
Um,
a couple of months. Okay.
Oh,
they were recording and then putting edited services on Vimeo, and for a while they were putting out a podcast um, on SoundCloud, just audio of the sermon, and then they would also make physical CD recordings um, and distribute those to some members.
so somebody had some insight as to what was coming down the pike.
Yeah, it was quite well, with some of the components when we started our refit, it was 30 years of effort that some of the folks had put into developing the entire workflow over time. So we even had a VCR hooked in there, so all of those old components and everything were there. And then we get to quarantine, and overnight, all of those were irrelevant. except for our the editing that we were doing to YouTube and that stuff. All of those in-house components, we were all at home now, with simply on all our own devices and webcams, and completely unprepared for camera
Right.
overnight, literally overnight. So yeah, it was quite the jump from being prepared than not being able to use any of that. But that was one of those foundational basis points that I think really allowed us to have a firm footing to begin with, so that when we were getting into the more complicated things, the audio and the camera presentation, that we were able to engage with those a little bit easier, because there was some foundation there already as far as the audio visual goes. So yeah, and so from there, that initial, that actually, let me start with some words from our board president. He gave a very good overview of what it looked like from his perspective of leadership, and as an audience member, as well. So I'm going to pull that up. I'm going to go ahead and play him real quick. Let's see, there you go.
Hi there, my name is James Trujillo and I'm the board president for the Olympia Unitarian Universalist congregation here in Olympia, Washington. And I've been asked to share some of my thoughts regarding our technology transition for this tech forum in working with congregations and how to create this technology option for remote and hybrid church services. And so I'm coming at this from a perspective of working with the congregation from a lay ministry sort of role, from a volunteer leadership role, and with the charge of representing the congregation and managing the finances and the policy of the congregation, and overseeing the ministry from a board perspective, and working with the minister in collaboration. And so that's the role that I have and how I view this technology question. And so everything that I share is going to be through that lens. The first thing that I wanted to talk about with our congregation that I think made a real difference in terms of the ability of the congregation to actually engage and stay connected was the decision of the board to support our reverend's recommendation to shift our staffing needs to allow for a technology expert to help us connect better. And so that was one of the primary decisions that was made early on when the pandemic first came on board, and we had the ability to make that decision because we had some additional dollars because of some staffing changes. So that was important. And I think that provided the congregation with some expertise needed in order to make the transition to full-on remote services. I would also say that the congregation engaged a number of volunteers that have been consistent and reliable and supportive. And they have brought their expertise because this is not something that you can do really on with just one person. And so having those volunteers has been critical to the success of OUUC's ability to have remote and hybrid services and meetings. Beyond that, I would also say that the congregation made an effort to devote funding to technology, and that was through some of our auction and other operational decisions that were within the purview of the minister to provide the right kinds of technological resources and make the right purchases to make sure that we were able to support an online presence and to stay connected. So those are some of the resources that we made available that are very practical and important for us to stay connected and to make the technology work. The other issue that I would say is that it's important for individuals to, within the congregation, to pay attention to our audience and the needs of our audience, meaning our congregants and our community members who are engaging with us, and doing whatever we can to provide them with the training and the communication and understanding of how people were going to come together through the technology resources. So I think we offered early on several learning sessions so people could understand how to use the technology, how to engage with people. And I thought that that was also extremely helpful and enabled individuals who perhaps were not as comfortable with technology to engage and stay engaged. I would, on another topic, I would say that the mindset of the congregation was very important. One of the sayings that came into being early on, I don't know who coined it within the congregation, but it's one that made, I think, a difference, is that the connecting over technology was, what was said was, it's not about perfection, it's about connection. And I think that gives people license to make mistakes and that it's okay, whether you're actually on the technology team helping make the connections, or if you're just a member of the congregation. There are many who have the mindset that they want to do things perfectly. And when you're learning something new, that just isn't in the cards. And so I think having that mindset was really helpful. Some of the issues that we encountered as board members were around how to have congregational meetings, how to manage discussions, and how to vote. And this is one of the learnings that I had as a board member, is that you had to set the stage and make sure that everyone knew in advance, both on the technology side and on the leadership side, how we were going to manage conversations, how people were going to be recognized, how they were going to share information. Was that verbal? Was it chat? And how was that all going to work, and make it clear to everyone so that they understand. And to make sure you're using language that is accessible to everyone so that they could participate. The other thing with congregational meetings that we learned early on is that it was important to figure out how we were going to vote on important matters that we were required to vote on according to our bylaws, and make sure that we were recording that in a way that made sense. And so we did a number of different trials where people are raising their hands. We're doing print screen shots, like pictures of the hands raised. So we had records of that we could go back to in case anyone was questioning whether or not individuals did vote. And so that was something that we worked on. Finally, a couple other quick points, that we've had problems with the chat functionality, with people chatting out of turn. We've likened it to people kind of speaking in the middle of a service, which people don't typically do, but over technology it seems to be okay. And so managing the chat function has been an issue. And finally, the future for our congregation is that we're viewing that hybrid is going to be part of what we need to do. And I think our challenge is to keep the technology as accessible and intuitive as possible, and to make sure that we're providing time and ways to incorporate people who are online just as we would people who are there physically with us in the congregation. So those are my comments for the Technology Forum from my chair as on the board with OUC, and I hope they're helpful. Thank you.
Wow, that was good.
Yeah,
I like that.
yeah. It
You
was
covered some
really,
really interesting topics there,
mhm.
and really demonstrated some planning and forethought about into what this was going to mean for the congregation and how we should go about planning for it. That was pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
The insight for providing staffing and funding is all important, right? Because you can't do anything without money and without funding, and you really need to have some sort of a full-time leadership. Even if you have volunteers working on the project, having that staff leadership can make all the difference because they provide guidance. Is that what you found?
Yes, and we had some of the most amazing leadership I've ever seen in my life. From Reverend Mary, our minister, to our religious educator, to our music director, the leadership there, they gave us, the volunteers especially, that leeway that we needed to figure out all of this stuff. And starting right off with Reverend Carrie Kopnick, one of my greatest sources of inspiration. She came on as our interim minister, interim community minister right before quarantine. And then when we jumped off into quarantine, she was at the forefront of this the entire time. And as a leader, stayed ahead of where all of the volunteers were the whole time. So we were working on the day-to-day, get Zoom figured out, and she would stay one step ahead of us, bringing in the information that we needed. She was the first one to introduce me to the Unitarian, the UU Tech response to COVID-19 on Facebook. She was also the one who introduced me to this forum, the Hybrid Ministry Tech Forum. She was the one that found out about all of this and then handed that to us as we needed it. So it was this fantastic working arrangement that just developed, and that was the real key to this, was the group learning that we were able to establish. I know too many solo operators out there. If you're a solo operator and you're watching, please engage with this forum. It will help. We had so many aspects that we could just bounce between individuals. And we had a group of an initial group of about 5 volunteers that came together. So that's what formed our tech team. So we learned Zoom as a group, and we could learn it and bounce ideas off. And then later on, we're able to distribute that workflow out to, so one person could do chat, one person could do mute, one person could do share, and not one person was overwhelmed with that process. And then those folks, Sharon, Teresa, Karen, if you're out there watching, amazing people. They have been there from the beginning and have been coming every single week since then. So as far as the team, we were completely blessed by the folks that we had on the team and then leading the team. And then when Joe came on in September of 2020, the team really took off. Joe's amazing. It does everything digital at OUUC. If it's digital, it's Joe. And so we had even better leadership than we had had before. So once we got into 2021 and we were into that long haul of Zoom where it was just, we were used to it. We had people on, but we're clicking away at it. We were really able to make some good strides with learning how to present a ceremony online with Zoom, which, Zoom wasn't designed to be production software. It's video conferencing software. And so we're balancing all of these little minute, minutia with Zoom to try and make this as seamless as possible, not to have that clunky, you're sharing your screen statement come up when we're doing share screens, and tried to craft that. Every single aspect of Zoom tried to craft that as we went. But because we had a team, we had so many different eyes looking at it, that it really, really helped. So as far as the the inspiration that I've had. It's been the team, it's been our minister, it's been all of the folks involved. We're really, really blessed when it comes to that aspect. So,
And I'm sure that that experience to figure out Zoom and how it will work for this, I'm sure that's a familiar scenario for a lot of people. And so, Joe, how did you come into this? Did you have any prior experience?
I had some. I have a professional background in marketing, public relations, communication, editing, and I was also a member of OUUC previously for 5 or 6 years or so. And so I was familiar with the congregation, still have friends and community members who were members, and so I heard about the position through them, and it was a really good fit, is a really good fit. And in September 2020, when I applied for this position, I was also applying and got accepted into a master's program at Washington State University for strategic communication, which is a program that trains for comprehensive digital marketing campaign strategy. So I completed that in December, and now I have even more of a background in digital marketing and just sort of creating campaigns around a lot of different platforms and engaging different types of multimedia and using it all to create a product and
Wow,
engage audiences.
how lucky is your church, huh? That's
Yeah,
wonderful.
it's so unfortunate that my position is only 20 hours a week because there's just so much to do and there's so much potential for how we could carry this forward. And I'm particularly interested in and passionate about, uh, oh my gosh, just repurposing content. So, there are so many. The parts of a service on Sundays have so many different components that you can pick and choose from. And it's great to have the full service on a streaming platform and it's great to have it live. But then there are so many opportunities for how to do that, whether you're creating a podcast or you're just taking out the sermon or whatever you want to do with it, or creating transcripts and taking out the poetry pieces, the written pieces from it. There are just so many things to do with that. So yeah, so hopefully more, I will be able to take advantage of that more later on.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, thank you. So, Michael, I understand you have some pictures and stuff to show us, and
I do, yeah. As far as I want to do just numbers real quick before we get into the our build.
mhm.
When we first got everybody up and onto Zoom, we were at about 220. We maxed out at about 220 in our Zoom meeting. And then as we progressed, we kept dropping. So we dropped to about 180 and stabilized there for a little while, and then dropped to 160 and stabilized there for a little while. And currently we're at about 120. And we've started to move back into the sanctuary. We've started to open up a little bit. And I think we were up to about 40 in the room just recently. And before this, we had been on web stands or music stands and webcams is kind of where we were at with things. But then we finally got to the point where we were going to put in some of these point to zoom cameras, PTZ cameras, pan tilt zooms. Sorry, I get those ones, and some vMix, professional paid production software, and that was quite a treat from just our normal webcams and whatnot. So I'm going to go through some of the pictures here. I'm going to put this up and just show you as we went in what we were dealing with, and then as we took it apart and put it back together, and where things are at now. So any other quick questions before I go show pictures?
We do have one question that has come in from Keith Miller in Paint Branch, Maryland. He's curious about your decision to do live streaming before COVID. Was it for the congregants or for outsiders, and what effect did it have on participation?
It was going out to YouTube. So, as far as, it was available for everyone to see. As far as participation goes, I don't know that that we were to the point of measuring audience engagement with those metrics yet at that point. It was still just a pretty basic, we're putting this out onto YouTube, and then that sort of was the extent of the thought to that. It was still relatively new.
All right, thank you.
Yep. So let me do this. Let me move that out of the way. Okay, so I'm going to let's just share my screen. Let's see, can you see that? Good. Okay. So this is the sign that we didn't get to actually see for a very, very long time. Olympia Unitarian Universalist congregation. You can see we're here in Washington State, so it's always green like this. And the metal roof of and the solar panels. That's something we do up here too. And this was, the sign out front. But then this is what it changed to. We got a banner, now we're online. And it's been, I think it may still be on there. But 2 years later, we're still covered up and moving back finally into the building. But when we got into the building, this is what we found. So we've got plastic shelves, we've got our CD copier, we've got our tape player and our multiple CD player, and I think that one is the DVD player. I can't remember. You can see the soundboard on a little rolling cart right there. And then at the very, very top are the transceivers for our wireless microphones. And there's a cable or two. And that is, it's a just rubbing her eye. It was a project to say the least. But believe it or not, this was actually in pretty good shape. Our AV guys were, this wasn't done just willy-nilly. This had been put together, and so it was added together over time. But it wasn't a complete confusing mess once we actually started taking it apart. But once we started taking it apart, we started by putting in the new camera. And you can see that up in the upper left corner, and the new computer. It's an all-in-one computer, so it looks like just like a monitor. It doesn't have a tower with it, and a second monitor. So we put those first two components in place, and then we integrated into the established AV system. And so we started ripping cables, and we went from our original picture, which was cables and shelves and components and everything. We pulled everything apart completely down to the holes in the wall. We pulled it all apart just because we had so much. It was an opportunity that we had to get in there and do this. But one of the major things we ran into at this point was that some of our folks had put in 30 years of effort to get that to where it was at. So we were treading on sacred territory in many ways. And so delicately, genuinely approaching this as something that was, really important to a lot of people was kind of my mindset moving into this. As much of a mess as the wiring seemed to be, there was a lot of care put into it. So we started taking everything apart, and this is the amplifier and the equalizer, the back end of it, with all of our cables going out everywhere. And that took a little sorting through. It was, I wouldn't say it's fun, but we grouped things and took them apart one by one. Found a lot of redundant cabling that we didn't need or haven't integrated yet. We've got um, speakers throughout the building. There's additional monitors in other rooms. We've got a commons area that's got an additional monitor to it. So there's some of these cables are just deadheaded at this point. They're just bundled. But you can see this is coming. We've got cables coming from everywhere. We've got conduit chases coming out of the floor. We've got stuff that was drawn over through the overhead ceiling, and then there's additional conduit in the ceiling going for some of the other things as well. So this was multiple years worth of build. So that was one of the things that we're still neatening up, is those all of those different where things came from, for whatever their reasoning was. So this is a perfect example. Some coming out of the ceiling, some coming out of conduit, and more. These are the ones coming out of the conduit and that piece of sheetrock was just placed over that cabling. So it wasn't. It wasn't. Yeah, I won't say anything else. This is us when we were torn apart. We took everything out, isolated everything. Those are all our wireless transceivers on the ground. Cabling, that pile of cables in the middle was, I think, mostly the redundant cables, things that were extra. And in case anybody's wondering, I have done some nonprofit technical work before, and I have seen the proverbial power strip plugged into a power strip, but we had power strip plugged into a power strip plugged into a power strip. That was a thing. That was a total thing. Some of the power strips may have been rather old. So pulling this all apart down to its absolute base components and figuring everything out was a really, really, really good idea for our site. So as we started to put things back together, it looked a little messy as we were going, but it wasn't too bad. And then we started to identify all our cabling. And this looks terrible to some degree, but it really isn't. Things were actually labeled nicely to some degree from like I said, our folks have been working on this for 30 years. There were labels for everything, and they were more or less consistent. There were a few that we didn't quite know what were, and maybe still don't. But those are just a matter of troubleshooting and tracking those. So that was one of the things, even though it's blue tape, blue tape and a magic marker it did work. And so I'm thankful to our guys for doing that. It could have been worse. But once we started getting things back together, these are our wireless transceivers. We put these on the wall in the position they're at so we could have a direct line of sight to the pulpit. Now, there's plenty enough power here that we don't necessarily need that, but it was one of those just in case, to eliminate as much between us and the signal as we could.
How many wireless microphone channels are there?
What do we have now? We've got four microphones, and then we've got the hearing assistance system. Is that it?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that's right.
Yep, looks like it.
Yeah. Yeah. So those are more or less in the same position that they were at on the shelving from before. But then now we're a little bit neater. Things are sort of started to come together, and it was a little bit better for my mind once we've got some of these things tucked away, and yet we still had to deal with the desk itself. And you can see the soundboard on the right. We've got our digital audio converter in the center, and then all of that's plugged in to our computer. And this was, the next stage once we got the cabling and all that figured out, but it started to look much better on the inside. this isn't complete. We're actually a little bit better than this now. Things are cable or bundled a little bit nicer. But makes a lot more sense than it did with the big drape coming over the from one side of the room to the other, dropping everything to the floor, running it around, and then bundling down low. It makes a little bit more sense, and there's less that's going to be potential to get caught or kicked or pulled or whatever it is. And we got it looking kind of neat. This isn't final. The desk right now is a temporary. We're going to hopefully get to the point where the desk itself will roll into the closet once the doors get readjusted. Or we're going to do something with the doors, so the whole thing will roll back into the closet as a unit. That's sort of where that's headed. But as a temporary basis, we've got everything connected and beginning to look good. So we went from Eagle's Nest, and now this is the view from the streaming computer across, and you can see it's not a huge room. I think we might be at 50 feet, maybe a little bit more. This is the point of view from the streaming computer, and then the point of view from the soundboard. And as we get down, I think I can go. So this picture is sitting at the streaming computer. So we're looking more or less directly at the pulpit. I think personally that this might be better a little bit higher up, just so that once we have head people in and we're not at the same head height, that might be a little bit nice, but that's something that will save planning for later. Let's see, these are actually multiples. And this is sort of where we're at right now with cabling. Bundled, coiled, labeled, blue tape, hopefully temporary, not 30 years down the line. But getting there. Much better, makes much more sense than it did. And the same thing with the desk. We've got that pretty much tightened up as far as what needs to be run and what's run there. And that's kind of where we're looking. It's small, it's tiny, very little footprint. We have that, all of this new technology coming into the sanctuary and all of this disruption that we've gone through. Keeping things simple was something that was a driving force for me, so that we're not introducing more upset and more concern as we go, because we've made all these massive changes, even though these are pretty massive changes. And so if you're at the pulpit looking out, this is what you see, and it's more or less the same view that's always been there. Before it was just the soundboard that they would roll out, so it's more or less in the same position. And the computer, once there's people in there, that is all blocked off by the congregation. So as far as the impact that it has on the speaker, it's not a huge, something in the background that they're really focused on. It's sort of hopefully that tech disappears a little bit into the background. So that was it. It seems to be working well. And last but not least, this is where we're at now. We're sitting and we're ready to go, and we're ready to put people in seats. That's where we're at. And we still have an overhead projector that we haven't gotten to using yet. But there's still lots of room for expansion. And so where we're headed next, we're going to be adding, I think, hopefully adding Stream Deck to the mix. Hopefully, at some point. That hopefully is, I don't know if we'll ever plug lights into it or not, but we might get that far. So.
All right. Well, that was fascinating.
Yeah, there's lots there.
Was that a screen in the corner of the chancel area, or a quilt?
Yeah, the 72-inch TV, is that what you're talking about?
Is that
I
what
think
it
you're
is?
talking about the quilt in the corner. Yeah, that's the backdrop for the pulpit. We do have a 72-inch television in there as well. That wasn't pictured, but the multicolored thing is the backdrop for the pulpit.
And how many cameras have you ended up putting in?
Just the one PTZ at this point.
Oh,
We had
okay.
supplemented with webcams for different things, but at this point it's just the one, and that's one of the expansion things is to have a supplemental camera up there to get those cross shots that we've talked about on here. Yeah, and in addition, I actually didn't. Forgot to add this. This is for the sanctuary. Our music director, Troy Fisher, has been working out of the Commons for the majority of this. He's put the piano out there, and he was out there by himself. And as things developed, he was able to add multiple webcams to his rig out there. So he's got his computer with 3 webcams and a Yeti microphone all bussed in, and then so he would be doing the switching between those. So that whole subnet still exists. And so he's running that. We'll have him on there. So we're integrating that with the vMix mix that we've got going for the sanctuary and the Zoom meeting, and switching be back and forth between those. And that's where Joe has become critical. I mean, Joe took this from the beginning, has been running the programming of all of that, those scenes and that workflow, to get that as seamless as possible.
Hmm. And so, the wiring that we saw in the closet there, I've seen a lot of wiring closets. I've seen worse than that. You were pretty good to start off with, but I've seen much worse than that. And that's usually due to many generations of upgrades, where one upgrade just piles on top of another upgrade on top of another upgrade without any thought of consolidating or pulling anything out. And so, yeah, you said you found some cables that were kind of unknown as to where they were going, didn't do anything that you could determine anyway. And we saw those coiled up there at the end, I think. Uh, but neatening out cables is a huge thing, not just to make it look good, while that has its value. It's all about service, about going back in and figuring out if there's a problem. How do I trace things down? Where does this wire go? What does that wire do? When everything is neatly bundled and labeled well, it makes servicing so much easier and faster. If you're in the middle of a service and something goes down, how fast can you fix it? Well, if you can't determine what's going on and what's where, it'll take a lot longer. So good on you for that. That was a huge step, and I'm sure that that made Joe happy because from her background, she's probably used to things being a little bit more orderly, right?
This was a huge learning curve for me because I I haven't done this type of technical work before, and to be totally honest, I wasn't aware it was going to be part of my job. Um, I don't think anyone was, which is totally fine. But I really welcomed the opportunity, for one thing, because there was already such a robust volunteer effort in the organization that Michael was heading up. And they were all very interested and enthusiastic, but Michael in particular, about learning how to move this forward. And yeah, it was all new to me. I didn't have a lot to compare it to.
Well, Michael was one of the major contributors to our show here for many, many, many weeks, and so we all learned together. And I appreciated what your board president was talking about in striving for um, not necessarily for perfection, but to make things work. And that's wonderful. Being allowed to make mistakes is important, especially as a volunteer. But what's really useful is having somebody who knows what a mistake is. And what I mean by that is when we're learning something completely on our own, without any outside influence, and without a mentor, without a basis for what is right and what is wrong, you can learn some really bad habits on your own. Making mistakes that you don't realize are mistakes and nobody else realizes a mistake. This is there are ways to do this, and that ain't it. Not knowing that can make things more difficult than they need to be, and can be a frustrating experience. So having somebody like Michael, who is part of the community, who had the resources to ask questions and get reliable answers, um, was probably very valuable, and put you on the path for success so that unnecessary mistakes didn't happen. That's great. So,
Absolutely.
speaking of not being told this was going to be part of your job, how did your minister take to all of this?
Um,
Were
I'll,
they, were they, how well did they adapt to this? What was their
yeah.
reaction to being on camera for the first few times, and did they
Well,
did they adapt to it well?
yeah. Reverend Mary started as our minister in August of 2019, so had only been there for just those few months, and like the rest of us, was not anticipating being on any of this whatsoever. But she has um, gravitas. You wouldn't have known whether she was uncomfortable or not. It was like she had been doing this for a very long time. And I know we were all very, very, very uncomfortable with it. But it was it's from what I can remember, it was the exact same um, uh, presentation as it was when we were in person. And so that is just a testament to her skill and ability as a speaker. There, always we were out in front trying to take care of the technical end of things so that there were not as many, hiccups. How does this work? All that type of thing. But she was able to give us the leeway that we needed to work. And then so slowly but surely those little things that came up, this is how we restart our cameras, and this is where the sub menus for Zoom are, and all of those things, was very open-minded to learning that. And with everything else that was going on, we were able to filter out the bulk of the heavy technical end of things, to get her just the important parts, just the pieces that were really, really necessary, to know, to be able to move forward with this, and did so. As far as examples go, it's just absolutely inspiring to me, to watch her lead this our entire congregation through this. It's been absolutely fascinating.
That's great. And so, just to remind all of our viewers, if you have any questions for Michael or for Joe, go ahead and put them into Mukana. Um, I'm sure they'll be happy to take them on. I do have one question from Keith Miller at Paint Branch in Maryland. How many people for how much time did the redesign and reconstruction of the system take?
Well, we started. Well, I guess we started in September by working on putting together an outdoor on-site service, which is where we started really thinking about this transition. So that would have been September of 2021, October, and then by Christmas we were up and running with the PTZ and the VMix.
And I remember that outdoor service.
Yeah.
You shared that part of the journey with us pretty well on our Discord, and we did and you told us and showed us all about it on one of our shows.
Yeah, I did. Yep, that's correct. So yeah, it would have been like September. I think if I'm right, Joe, I think it was September.
Yep, that's right. We did one in September and one in October.
So yeah, fully a few months of working through the research acquisition, all of those steps of it easily. But then we had the team, so we also were able to move a little bit faster than like a solo person would be able to do.
And so, when did you essentially finish the wiring and rearranging the desk and all that?
Um,
Or is it? I mean, it's not finished,
um,
but
yeah, no,
are we ever finished?
yeah, are we ever finished? No, recently we had the camera and everything up for Christmas, and then we actually had a flood.
Oh,
We got things hooked up. Yeah, we don't get a lot of snow up here, but when we do, we got a couple of feet, and then when it melted, it flooded the sanctuary. So I got a panicked call, and we ran in and tore everything down, or moved everything is what we did. And then so that was over the holidays. And then so through January, we started putting things back together. And we are working right now on really dialing in sound. And so it's just relatively recently that I would say we were complete with our build. But from here on out, it's definitely more polishing and neatening and that type of thing. So, yeah, relatively recently, I think if there we had to put a
Last month,
last month.
I would
Yeah.
think. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, we had all the components, but the pictures you saw, those were all about a month ago or so. And then I think, like Michael said, we're still waiting on a couple pieces, getting the table able to roll into the closet and um, that kind of stuff.
Hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting idea for the table that I want to come back to. But first, I want to ask. So one of the big things that I've been asking a lot of people about, I think it makes a big difference how you handle it, is the workflow that starts with the worship team and the minister in planning for a service and all the information that has to flow to people who are operating the equipment. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that's definitely Joe's territory.
Um, so just technically, one of the most difficult pieces has been being able to communicate on site um, and with the people online because our um, the channels won't I don't know how to describe this, Michael, but um, we can't have multiple channels open at a time or else we get intense feedback. And so having to relay messages in the room to people who are off-site, who are online, and vice versa is challenging just technologically. Um, and I, interpersonally, I think people have a big there's a lot of respect for the tech team. Just a lot of members are just in awe of anybody who knows anything technical. And then, of course, there's a lot of respect for the worship leaders and anybody who's involved in services. So that interpersonally, that two-way communication is fairly smooth.
So it's nice to hear that your congregation is on board with all the tech. And has anybody objected to seeing all this new equipment and stuff in the sanctuary?
Not to me. Um, no, people are really excited to have just things are already just smoother all the time. Scene transitions, that kind of thing, sound quality, uh, most of those things are just better than they have experienced before. And the only thing I've noticed is that the better it gets, the more picky people tend to be. And so they kind of have an idea of how good it can be. And so they want it to be better and better. And so invariably after a service, people will come up to the tech desk and say, "So that was really great. Can I just tell you one thing?" And they'll have some very minute suggestion for what we can do to improve things. Most of which we're already kind of working on, or we just need like one other component to make it work, or whatever it is. But um, yeah, people are very receptive.
Raising expectations can be a two-way street. It can be a dangerous thing sometimes. But
That's
no,
right.
that's beautiful. I'm really glad to hear that the congregation is so well adapted and on board and encouraging of you. That's really nice. So I'm sure that well, I know that your services includes a number of slides and maybe some pre-recorded content. How is that planning and information and content transferred to you, and how far in advance? Do you ever get in a situation where, a worship leader will come up to you Sunday morning and say, "Oh, I made a bunch of changes"?
We manage pretty much everything through Google Drive, and uh, pretty much every week has its own folder, and so we'll have a full script in there. And then I create separate scripts and Q to Q documents for volunteers. One for whoever's operating the soundboard, and then I'm working on getting a template script for whoever's operating vMix. And and the luckily Google Docs is updated in real time. So yes, sometimes Sunday mornings there are updates, usually not to slides or videos, that kind of content, but word changes and stuff that um, are pretty easy to roll with. We have our worship planning meeting on Thursdays, so generally, pretty much all service components are set by the end of the day, Thursday, or maybe Friday. And I'm able to create the order of service a couple days in advance. And um, from there, you generally haven't had many last minute changes. Um, but at least from my perspective, I'm getting better and better at using vMix, so it's easier to incorporate last minute changes. And if there is an extra slide or video that we have to put up, it's easy to just throw that in there.
Great. All right. Yeah, a well-oiled machine, right? Really important.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw in, I mean, that's where we're at now. But I got very used to early on expecting last minute, you know, huge media downloads. And the worst I had was a gigabyte, right before we were supposed to go. And so I just got used to that might be, something that's going to happen is we'll get that change. And thankfully we've gotten, like Joe said, we've gotten so much better at it. But keeping that always in the back of my head that somebody's going to come in with something to change is was just put that on my checklist. Has anybody changed anything, or are they going to? It's just anticipation for it. So
Another thing I'd add is just a couple months ago when we were still all online because of the COVID risk level in our county, we did a service that was it was like a rebroadcast of a UU district service. So anyway, it was a Vimeo video, and I was screen sharing this, and it failed. I failed. It was completely user error. Um, but I had to call on Michael in the middle of the
Oh,
service
yeah.
and say, can you get this video running? This is the buffering is terrible on my end. Please help. And so I stopped in the middle of it and I just made an announcement that we were going to transfer some things and please stand by. And people are great with that. And at least I didn't hear from anybody who was grumbling about it. Like, oh my goodness, why didn't that work better? People get it. And actually I go to the meetings that our worship arts team has, and I heard from them at the last meeting that they really appreciate seeing members of the tech team, me and all of the volunteers, in front of the congregation on Sundays and otherwise. They really like hearing from us, and even those moments when maybe there's a glitch or something's not going right, if we make that FaceTime and say, "Hi, I'm here, I'm working on it," they really love that. And they love knowing that there are people behind the screens and people kind of um, shepherding all of these components that are making the service happen. And I really liked hearing that because sometimes I think we get preoccupied with, you know, I'm just behind the curtain, you don't see me, I'm just pushing buttons to make things work, and you're not supposed to know that I'm here. But they said, no, we really want to know you're there. Like, you have a really important job and a really important role. And so um, we like seeing you and hearing from you, all the full tech team. So I love that.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I love that. I do have a question. Well, not I, but Bruce McNair from Stamford, Connecticut has a question. One small but important detail in your last comment. Whoever is running the soundboard, you said. How many people do you have who can run the soundboard? How were they recruited and trained? And what about cameras and video production?
Yeah, great question. So right now there are probably seven, six, 4 to 7 people who can run the soundboard. Some of those people were trained on the soundboard pre-pandemic, and so they sort of have all of the operations have changed a lot. So they are familiar with um, uh, previous operations, but it's the same soundboard. Um, so so that's why I say 4 to 7. And then some of them are tech team members who just joined the tech team during the pandemic. And so they have sort of transitioned from, okay, I'm familiar with Zoom. I've been on the tech team. I'm in this world now. Tell me how to use the soundboard. And so they've come in and helped with a few services as well. So yeah, the soundboard um, uh, is, I have been considering it pretty separate from um, the the vMix and camera operations, which I have typically taken on mostly because I don't have that Q to Q script ready. So I haven't been able to train many people besides Michael on that yet. So, and that person's job um, is is running the Zoom meeting, streaming from Zoom to YouTube live. Um, I shouldn't say running the Zoom meeting, hosting the Zoom meeting, um, and and changing scenes on vMix. So they're all preset, which means that we don't have to operate the camera during the service. Usually, we just are able to click on presets. Um, and any slides or graphics or videos that we have. Um, and hopefully, um, hopefully at least 3 or 4 members of the tech team will be trained in that role as well, um, eventually.
What do you use What do you show on screen when you're moving camera from one preset to another?
Nothing. No, it just moves.
Oh, so you're showing the move on camera
Yeah.
on the
Showing the
screen?
pan, yeah, yeah. Our Well, let's see. Without our music director in the sanctuary, he's been in the commons with the choir. So we've actually been switching from the sanctuary to the Zoom feed to his Zoom feed. Um, between scenes. So we haven't had a lot of panning within the same room so far. And this Sunday actually will be the first Sunday that we have him with the piano in the back in the sanctuary. So it'll be interesting to see how those transitions go. But they're not very far. The camera doesn't have far to go from one to the other. So it's been pretty smooth so far. But we'll have to see if people come up after the service and complain about it. Maybe we'll need to get a transition slide in there.
Right, right. So very cool. Well, so where do you see yourselves going from here?
Yeah, as far as the equipment itself goes, I think that I'd love to see the Stream Deck plugged in there so that we can get it to where we can have more volunteers accessible to it. That's what I think we'll get to the point. I mean, we get to do the programming the week before, hopefully, and then get to that point. That's what I would really like to see. I think that we could really open it up and have an even deeper bench of folks who can help. So,
We'd also really love a digital soundboard. That's
oh
gonna
yeah,
that's gonna be an, another
yeah,
investment soon, hopefully,
yeah.
because it's just another way to have presets and be able to, click on Reverend Mary, click on, and it's already optimized for their voice and their microphone. That would be great.
All right. And you mentioned two things about the desk. One being able to roll it into the closet, which is an interesting idea. And you also mentioned something about feeling like it could be higher to give you a better viewpoint when there are people in the room and people are standing for hymns or whatever. When you're seated at the back, it'll be difficult for you to see the chancel, I imagine, right? So, what are your thoughts on that? Have you given any thought to maybe building um, a proper tech desk, a booth, perhaps?
Yeah, ever since the beginning of this, I had envisioned at some point having the completely separate booth in another room, and have that so we were isolated, into a sound room. But then once we got into the space, it was like, no, we need to be in here with everybody else. But then how do we do that? And so we've been kind of back and forth and around with this as far as how to position everything, whether it would be a built-in desk in the corner, or as we have it now, which is on a table. What had happened before is the soundboard would roll out. It was on a cart. And so we would open up the doors and then that would roll out and then we would have the one operator there. And then the camera was on a tripod. So that would be set up and taken down every week, set up and taken down every week. So the idea to put things kind of where they were at with the desk was it's sort of this strange in between space right now, where we want it to be able to be, secure either in its own permanent desk or in the cabinet, or, in the closet. But we haven't completely settled on what that's going to look like. But as we've kind of gotten into this, what it's looking like we're kind of going towards is an actual desk that's built that all of these components are, fit into, that's on rollers, and then that whole thing can be rolled back into the closet. Now the closet are just bypass doors right now, so there's gonna be some alteration there. But then the idea is that that whole thing would roll back in. But Joe and I were both talking earlier on that, something that was raised, a little raised platform in the back in the corner, would be a really good idea. But the space is so small that it really it pretty much before you know it, you've got your own other tech pulpit bit built in the back that's really going to start impacting the feel of the space. So it's kind of this, it feels to me like we're going sort of one step at a time, that this is, the way this works. But when we're sitting there now, we're right at head level, so we can just barely, just get, the eyes of whoever's speaking. So if we have to signal them, we're thumbs up in the air like this or something. Um, but so up a little bit in that standpoint would be nice, in my thoughts anyway.
Great. Yeah, and then I don't know if you had a chance to see it, but our last show 2 weeks ago was all about Stream Deck. It's one of several shows that we've done about Stream Deck, and uh, this last show was hearing how one church in Scotland has done some amazing things using Stream Deck to be able to run an entire service with just a few buttons on the Stream Deck and not ever having to touch a mixing board or a video switcher during the service. It was remarkable.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, that's definitely something to look forward to. Can make and so this is a discussion that I was having with somebody online. Is that once you use automation to reduce the complexity and the number of steps that it takes to do things, is that actually a replacement for proper training of how to do things without it, right? And that's an interesting question. Is what happens if that doesn't work one week,
Well, yeah, and that's the important piece of this is that, especially with vmix, we've got the all the programming that goes into it, and I remember when I first got into OBS, which I know a lot of folks on here use, but I had no clue, what that involved, and so then I started getting into file path, and then where I have this saved and what doesn't work, and so that whole hiring for that is expensive. So that knowledge for all of that, chronicling that as we go in as simplest form as possible, is hugely important. But then I think that ultimately we might get to a point where things like the weekly programming for vmix could be farmed out to a programmer over the course of the online, somebody who could do that over the internet. Those that exists, it's a thing, but it would be that's a whole other extrapolation later on down the line. So yeah, keeping that knowledge around the equipment that we're using is just a hugely important consideration.
Do you find your programming for vmix changes from week to week?
Yes, we do have to personalize some camera angles a little bit sometimes. And honestly, right now, everything else is changing from week to week. Like I said, this is going to be the first Sunday that our music director is back in the sanctuary with the piano. The following Sunday will be the first time that the whole choir is back in the sanctuary as well. And that Sunday, we have a guest minister who is um, remote, and so he will be preaching from Zoom and will need to bring in his Zoom feed into the sanctuary while the other worship leaders are on site. So everything is different from week to week, and so we're rolling with a lot of changes.
All right. Yeah, so we didn't. I was wanting to ask if you how often you do interaction, bringing people from Zoom into the sanctuary. 'Cause we didn't see a monitor in your pictures, but you said you did have a large screen monitor that you can roll out, I suppose, right?
Right, yeah. Um, it's been every week so far since our music director has been on Zoom. But um, eventually, I guess on when we're able to lead worship from the sanctuary completely, then we will be able to stream from vMix to YouTube directly instead of going vMix to Zoom to YouTube, because we want YouTube to capture all of the feeds, including other Zoom participants. Um, so that will enable us to show on the screen uh, in the sanctuary, that will enable us to show the Zoom gallery view, which will be cool because it brings in the online participants in the room. And then Michael has also brought up the idea of having on that TV having a webcam that can show the view of the participants in the sanctuary from the front of the room, so that those on Zoom can also see everybody in the room on site.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
You know, having your roomers and your Zoomers being able to acknowledge each other, and to remind ourselves that there are other people, other congregants who we can't see in the room, but they are here with us as well. Um, so I remember your board provided you early on with some funding to get the equipment and the expertise that you needed. Just curious, have they provided you with an ongoing budget?
No.
Oops. Okay.
Easy answer.
Next question.
Well, we talk to a lot of people, a lot of different congregations, and we look at a lot of rooms. And here on the show, we did needs assessments for 3 different size congregations early on. Remember, we did a small, a medium, and a larger congregation. Talking with them about, their kinds of services and recommending, what they could, what kind of equipment suite would really serve their congregation well. And so we often hear from people that just having one camera is very, very limiting. PTZ cameras are not well known for their smooth movements when moving from one preset to another. Some are particularly whiplashish. So having multiple cameras not only can provide you with a more visually interesting presentation because you can get different views and you can transition from a wide shot to a close-up to a medium shot, but being able to switch between cameras from one camera to another while the first one is repositioning so that you're not seeing it move. All of that together makes a multi-camera presentation that much more visually interesting. And we also mentioned just a few minutes ago that, in any kind of production environment, whether it be broadcast production or corporate production or house of worship, we never really consider our work done or our equipment suite final, right? We're always progressing because technology progresses, our needs progresses, our needs evolve. Our worship styles evolve, our technology evolves, even our theology evolves, right? And so technology and the equipment that it takes is also kind of like, infrastructure, like your HVAC and your heating system and your carpeting. They need to get upgraded every now and again. And so in technology, even more frequently than those, but I'm just running that parallel, that illustration there. So it's very impressive that your board supported you as they did, and we look forward to having them support you on a continuing basis, because it sounds like they really want to.
Yes, I
Congregation
hope
is
so.
behind you, and that's great.
Yeah.
Yep, it's been quite, I feel very honored to have been part of it, and to be able to bring it this far and, take the things that I've learned here and share them. So yeah, this has been, it's been quite the thing to be part of. So, so yeah, I think we're getting actually pushed. We've got meditation practice to go to and put on.
Yeah, well,
So,
well, thank you so much. It's been really nice, and having you here, and Michael and Joe, having you share with us so much of your journey. It's really refreshing, and it really helps us all to feel better about our own journey, because everybody has choices to make and decisions and upgrades, and we're all working with our worship teams and trying to figure this all out. Some of us for the very first time. You had a little bit of a jump on many people because you had some experience in it, but it's all a learning experience. And I wanted to thank you again for coming and sharing with us. So, and we hope that all of our viewers have enjoyed this time together, and perhaps I hope you found it informative and energizing and motivating. Um, Remember, if you would like to participate on the panel on our show, um, you can very easily do that. Maybe you can offer a perspective, ask better questions than I am, give us a better experience. Just log into the show 30 minutes early, so 6:30 Eastern Time. We'll check you in. We'd love to have you. And if you're hungry for more production-related communities like this one, we're not the only one. We are frequent guests and followers of Office Hours, the Zoom Test Kitchen, AV Tech Talks are some of our favorites. The Synagogue Tech Forum, which is here on alternate Thursdays. We leapfrog each other. So they'll be on next Thursday at 3 o'clock Eastern Time. They have a larger European audience, so they need to get earlier. They all that information can be found on our Discord. There's a channel there called Related Shows. And the Discord itself is a great resource for information. We have been collecting and logging and cataloging information during this entire journey of 39 weeks of the Hybrid Ministries Tech Forum. And there are places there that you can ask questions and get really good answers, because we watch it all the time. So there's after you've signed up for the Zoom show, you've gotten a confirmation email. There's information there on how to log into or register for the Discord and Mukana and all of that. And so there you go. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. Have a great experience with your services online. Challenge yourselves, push yourselves forward. It's worth it. It really is, because you're not only serving yourself, you're serving your congregation, right? Any parting words?
thank you.
And with that, let me close out the show, and we'll move into the post show. So just hang around for a moment. Good night, everyone.